Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet. Well, the United States has announced the suspension of all foreign and aid and ordered the review of American financial assistance to other countries to ensure they are efficient and consistent with its foreign policy under the America First agenda. The move comes after the US President Trump signed an executive order in this regard. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce has said that President Trump has made it clear that the United States is no longer going to blindly dole out money with no return for the American people. In 2023, USA distributed nearly $45 billion in foreign to 159 countries. The question that comes up is which country will be the most affected by this particular move. We'll discuss this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, former diplomat, Mr. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, senior journalist, with us on the show as well. Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist, joins us on the program. Last but not the least, Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, also joins us on the show. Professor Nalapat, I'll begin with you, sir. So as far as I can tell from the trends and the kind of rhetoric and narrative Donald Trump has maintained, even since before he ran for president, it is absolutely and abjectly clear that when he talks about giving money to foreign countries, the number one agenda is to stop funding Ukraine and end this war. Would you concur with that outlook, sir? And isn't it a bright way to end this war as well, which has been going on incessantly without reason or rope for the past few years?
Well, Vineet, I'd like to say that any new administration coming in is entitled to have a close look at, we're talking of $45 billion here, a close look at how that money is spent. And Trump's priorities are not Biden's priorities by a long shot. So it's only logical that there should be a pause on all aid. It's a pause. It's not a complete stoppage of aid. And those programs that the Trump administration believes are not somehow beneficial to the United States, those programs will be cut and the other programs will continue. As far as Ukraine is concerned, quite frankly, the sooner this war ends, the better. And I quite agree with you that a lot of impact is going to be felt on Ukraine. It's very clear the tap of unlimited assistance is being turned off. Both, the direct assistance to Ukraine by the Biden administration has been in the range of nearly $70 billion. Another $30 or $40 billion, if you calculate it, is going as indirect assistance. So frankly, that's a huge burden on the US taxpayer. And what has the taxpayer got in return? I mean, if he's gotten the return of getting back territory that Ukraine had before 2014, it's not happened. In these, if any balance sheet will show, it's been a complete write-off, a complete loss. So yes, I think the maximum impact is on Ukraine, at least so far as newspaper headlines are concerned, and so far as European capitals are concerned. But I'd like to say that overall, it's a sensible move to have a relook at all these high spending policies and to find out which are helpful to the United States, in the sense that which countries are helpful to the United States and countries that are not helpful to the United States. I don't see why assistance should be given to them, Vineet. Thank you.
Right. Dr. Kohli, where do you look at this administration and its fervor in terms of saving billions of dollars for its taxpayers going? Donald Trump obviously understands, he's a businessman, he understands that every relationship is a transaction. But is it so? Is a relationship like this with the World Health Organization, with the Paris Accord and with Ukraine and perhaps even with India be termed as a transaction?
Well, good afternoon, Vineet. Good afternoon to my fellow panelists and the NewsX viewers. I think that I see it as a mixed approach. Of course, nobody can question the pragmatism involved in stopping this aid, wastage or drainage of, I would say, precious resources of Americans in this manner, where nothing has been achieved so far. I remember when President Biden came, the Afghanistan incident happened, and pulling out of the forces from Afghanistan happened, and we had a similar kind of comment that probably either he ran away from Afghanistan, he left Afghanistan in the lurch, or he was trying to save the resources of America at that time. Let's go into the economics of America for a minute. of economy, about 26, 25, 26 trillion dollars. Some say 27, but I would say about 26 trillion dollars. The size of debt, very important, Vinny, about 36 trillion dollars. If we calculate debt to GDP ratio, the ratio is at a very poor. Every 12 to 18 months, Vinny, they add another $1 trillion to their amassed debt. I think that's where the economics lies. That's where President Trump's business mind lies. And it's not just about business. President Trump basically doesn't want the resources to be drained out, as you opened your statement. That's very correct. And he feels there's nothing which is going to be achieved out of this. There is no either strategic advantage. There is nothing, he doesn't, I have doubts if NATO would survive for a very long time. He means business, whether it is Greenland, whether it is Panama, whether it is calling Prime Minister Trudeau as, "Hi, Governor Trudeau, how are you?" You know, that's the way he does. He wants Canada to become 51st. So I think President Trump, but what I didn't like on economic front, if you ask me honestly, is the use of word tariff more often than not from the time he's taken over the reins. I think using it as an economic weapon around the world may not be considered as best of the policy. As an economist, I can tell you. But then, as for a stoppage of funds, preventing drain of funds, I think same thing is probably going to happen to Israel in the times to come. We have seen a ceasefire. I hope it remains for a longer time. I do look forward to a similar thing happening in Syria and Lebanon also. And he doesn't want to drone away the funds in these countries as well. So I think from the point of view of bringing peace to the world, from the point of view of preventing World War III, it's a very positive move, although I hope it remains like that. But basically, it's been a mixed kind of economic approach as far as President Trump is concerned, Vinny.
Ambassador Kapoor, can this be classified or categorized as burning bridges? We've seen what's happening with the United States and Colombia at this point in time as well. They refuse to take any illegal immigrants. Trump decided to have a knee-jerk reaction and impose more tariff. They retaliated with the same thing. I mean, this ugliness, if this spreads with every country that the United States is dealing with, then they have a real problem at hand.
Well, Vineet, the panelists before me have made their points. I would like to say that yes, about Colombia, you have this problem currently going on, and it's a difficult situation for America to be in. But the basic purpose of foreign aid is entirely different, and foreign aid is seen as a must by every country because that is also an instrument of your national interests, and to promote your national interests, to sort of make friends with other countries, to get them to align their views and their thinking and their voting at the UN and other bodies along with yours. So also to influence the decision making in other countries. So India also does a lot of foreign aid, and each country which has the capacity to indulge in foreign aid and support other countries does that. Now the component of foreign aid as a total component of the budget of any country is very small. In most cases, it is not even touching 1%. The recommended percentage is 2% of the national budget should be given to foreign aid by the UN and other agencies as a recommendation. But the amount which gets earmarked or disbursed, like even in the case of the US, is very small. Now, there are distortions, of course, in this foreign aid. For example, the aid to Ukraine, which Trump may see as a distortion, and he may not support it. He may support the aid to Israel, but there's also the aid to Bangladesh. The Mohammed Yunus regime, which has been stopped immediately. I saw a official message from the White House, which says that all aid to Bangladesh is immediately suspended. Bangladesh is also a major recipient of the US foreign aid, for example, $4.5 billion out of the $45 billion. The other aid recipients include Afghanistan, which has a regime which is contrary to human life and human rights and human interests. So Pakistan also receives a lot of aid. India receives very little aid from USAID, and some of it is very disruptive sort of aid to support the human rights work in India. So, it is going to impact. It is good to review, but the policies of US and the policies of India vis-a-vis the outlook on foreign aid is entirely different, quite diametrically opposite, I must say, because the US talks about the aid being focused in a way that it serves only American interests, whereas India never does that. It says that the aid has to follow the pattern and fit into the paradigms and check the following boxes. Does it make America safer? Does it make America stronger? Does it make America more prosperous? Is it efficient? Is it consistent with US foreign policy? Does it fall under the America First agenda? Uh, so they want to review and realign foreign aid on behalf of the, what they say as the hard-working taxpayers' money, which is absolutely justified and correct. But Indian policies, which I have dealt with very, very closely firsthand, as the Minister of Economic Assistance and Aid, for example, in Nepal, where the budget was about 150 crores, we were not even allowed to speak about our aid because we felt that if we had our own interests involved, then it would sort of, distort the basic purpose of aid, the basic beneficiaries. So it's a very, right now, since we're only talking about US foreign aid, I will not get into those aspects in great detail, which is another big topic. But India has had a tradition of thousands of years where you benefit, if you talk about your own interest in, helping somebody, then that aid does not have any merit, does not have any purity, does not have any sanctity. That is our, thinking for thousands of years. So even the place where I'm in rural India currently, for example, it is in Mudanali in Karnataka near Bangalore. They are running a massive educational enterprise. They run a massive medical college and hospital, and all that is being done absolutely free. They're doing free treatment, free operations, free training, free education for doctors, nurses, paramedics, free treatment for all patients, free medicines. So that sort of thing to see, I have worked in all the continents abroad. It is impossible to come across a situation like this where you can even think of this sort of thing, that you are giving completely free education to become a doctor or a dentist or any other specialty right from scratch, or you're giving education free from entry point KG to graduation or post graduation or doctorate. So whereas in the other countries it is more transactional, and US is the epitome of transactional aid. So for them to review it from their own lenses is considered correct. And the countries which will suffer very significantly immediately, which will have an impact immediately, are countries, as you have mentioned, Ukraine, but also Bangladesh and Afghanistan and some of those other countries which need to be put under check and balance, that the aid has to go, for example, if it is being given to Bangladesh for protection of the human rights of minorities, lives of minorities, making sure that they are not being raped and their lands are not being confiscated and they are not being murdered, their temples are not being destroyed. So all those sort of parameters have to be built into the aid after the review, so that the aid is properly channeled and properly utilized. Back to you, Vinny.
All right, Pramit, how do you look at this situation? In fact, Donald Trump, gave some logical explanations for pulling out of a number of organizations, including the WHO. He said that we are sitting at 300 million, giving billions of dollars to the World Health Organization, and China, with a population of 1.4 billion, is giving perhaps 1/20th of that. Do you think that these pullouts are logical and best for the American people? And if they are best for the American citizen, the American people, is it going to create an imbalance throughout the world?
There's always been an ideological opposition to the concept of foreign aid by the right wing in America, who have argued that aid, if to be given to anybody, should be spent in America first. And their argument has been that it should be the private sector, it should be investment, which should be driving development across the world. And to some degree, they're right. I mean, if you look at all foreign aid in the world combined together, it is a very small fraction of FDI or FPI. But as it's happened, is countries that have become emerging economies, like India, have basically, one of the reasons we virtually take no aid anymore from, I think, the central government level, from other countries is we don't need it. Basically, it's about FDI flows. It's smaller countries, LDC countries, that still require foreign aid for a number of reasons. And it is those countries which will be the most damaged. Bangladesh, for example, is very concerned. It receives about $200 million worth of aid every year from the United States. And it was expecting a special grant of about another $300 million under the Biden administration, both of which have now been canceled or on hold. For a country like Bangladesh, though it's a reasonably large economy, given its precarious balance of payment situation, it has only 3 months of foreign exchange reserves. This is a problem for their economy. Pakistan receives almost no aid from the United States. Biden had cut that to $300 million, and that will now, of course, be suspended. But for a country like Nepal, which receives again about $200 million, that's a fairly sizable amount of money and will cause problems for them. But it is a lot of African countries, Ethiopia, and Arab countries like Yemen, which receive $1 or $2 billion a year, traditionally from the United States. They will be affected. But keep in mind the exemptions that have been made. The two biggest aid recipients, besides Ukraine, are Israel and Egypt. They are exempted under the Camp David Accord agreement. In addition, humanitarian food supplies, which remains a very large portion of American aid, will so far be exempted. So we'll have to see what happens. But my sense is that some of that money will automatically come back into play. And larger, to some degree, this is symbolic. But I think what we will see is Ukraine, definitely that's a pressure point on Ukraine as far as because that is by far the largest recipient, $13.6 billion a year before. And that is a pressure point in terms of a peace conference. But I think what we're really going to be seeing in Trump is, yes, as you mentioned, organizations like the WHO and so on will come under pressure simply because they don't fit in with an effectively quasi-isolationist American foreign policy anymore. America doesn't see the need to provide that assistance and doesn't see any real reason to do so. America will be, for Trump at least, strategic relation or long-term strategic goals are less important now than at least signaling to his own domestic audience or his domestic base that he is not transferring funds from the United States to other countries without any specific tangible return. And that is a big shift in American foreign policy and basically reverts America back, at least under Trump, back to what it was pre-World War I. Because that is exactly the mentality that guided American foreign policy at that point.
All right. Professor Nalapat, concluding thoughts from you, and then we'll, of course, take concluding thoughts from the rest of our panelists as well. Professor Nalapat.
Well, look, yeah, aid is as good as the instruments that use the aid, which means the governance instruments. And what has happened is several, billions of dollars of aid to several countries have not landed up where they should be with the people, especially the poorest people, but with the elite, with a few rich people and a few vested interests who grab all of it. Now in Bangladesh, for example, if you're giving aid, whom are you giving it to? You're essentially giving it to individuals who have toppled an elected government and who have basically set up a government which is populated with extremist elements. Is that desirable? Is it? Not at all. Is it desirable in Afghanistan? Not at all. So I'd like to point out, Vineet, that when you're talking in terms of poor countries getting aid, how much of that aid actually reaches the poor is a question that we should ask, Vineet.
Dr. Kohli?
Well, I think on a broader perspective, aid is fine. I mean, what America decides to do, its own prerogative. I said the American balance sheet is not looking very healthy. That could have been one of the reasons why President Trump has blocked it, apart from other policy reasons and his thought process. But I think what America needs to look in a broader perspective, to my mind, is the tariffs, because America was infected badly by inflation over the last 4 years, I would say, since COVID, and it has barely about managed to curtail that. The Fed interest rates are still very high, and it's not going to be very good for America if inflation starts shooting up because of the tariffs. And aid also leads to deficit financing. We should not forget. Who can forget the helicopter money which America did in the times of COVID? And it kept suffering from inflation for a very long time because of what it did. So if you have to print more dollars, and checkbook diplomacy anyway, Vineet, doesn't work. China has been trying it. Every time China tries to move forward in its checkbook diplomacy, it turns out to be a disaster. And the beneficiary country eventually realizes that this was not for our interest. It was in. I think that is what most of the countries have been. These countries, when they try to do it, they get the experience. So I think it's a very positive move. But I would be happier if President Trump drops out this tariff as an economic weapon.
All right, Ambassador Kapoor.
Aid is a very essential part of the national interest of every country in the world, and it will continue all over the world. It is how the country sort of configures that aid and calibrates that aid is very important. Some countries like China do it very negatively. They give out aid in a predatory form where they have vested interest, where they are trying to distort the country's, strategic interest or promote their own strategic interest in a very aggressive manner. US also gives out aid, but not in such a predatory or aggressive manner, but does give aid in a focused manner that it has to benefit US interests, and it has to sort of do some work in the country concerned, but it does not always result in positive outcomes. For example, if we just see the example of Pakistan, Pakistan has been receiving billions of dollars of aid since its independence in 1947. What it has got to show for that aid is absolutely peanuts or totally negative sort of outcomes, in the sense that the army people and the elite have got richer. They have big houses in Pakistan and all over the world. They have big bank balances. Their children are flaunting the latest fashion attire, shoes, everything, and they have millions or billions in their personal accounts. Whereas the people have become poorer. There is very little to show by way of development. So it has not at all been a very productive factor in a country which is so corrupt and so focused on terrorism. So that sort of thing has to be balanced properly. It like some of the other panelists, including Professor Madhav Nalapat, mentioned, that you have to monitor it, you have to evaluate it, you have to assess it, you have to continuously make sure that the aid is being used for the purpose for which it has been given. In Afghanistan, tens of billions of dollars worth of equipment could not be extricated, and it's still lying around in Afghanistan, is being used by the Taliban. There are some reports that Trump is going to demand return of that equipment which has been lying there, which was given as aid by US. So it's a very complicated mix. In the Ministry of External Affairs of the Government of India, I was fortunate to be the diplomat who received the maximum amount of funding for projects abroad till the time I was in service. And we were able to use it very, very effectively for making big hospitals, big roads, big projects, big bridges, big universities, schools, education. A lot of positive aspects were delivered to the country concerned, which are still being seen as role models of bilateral cooperation. Now, if the aid is distorted, then it results in a lot of negativity.
All right, Pramit, concluding thoughts, please. 30 seconds. We've completely run out of time.
I think the broader question will remain, I think, as economist Mr. Kohli, Dr. will mention, how far does America go down the unilateral path? Because that will cause enormous global imbalances and disruptions. Tariffs will be enormously destructive to economies like India, for example. Immigration restrictions that affect service exports, which are by far the single largest driver of on our external side. There's even now talk of putting restrictions on remittances, though that's not on the official line. I think it's more in the social media arguments. These are going to be the real questions that have to be asked, will have to be addressed and responded to. Aid is a minor part of that game. It affects smaller countries. But for larger economies like India, we still depend very, very much on our external sector to keep our economic rates up. And those are the questions we have to be most concerned about.
All right, fair enough. Well, we've run out of time. Appreciate everybody who joined us. Taking a short break. We'll be right back.